Hello, I'm TyroTheRam, and this is Mortal Fallacy, which is a game I've been working on as my final year project at Teesside University. It's a turn-based tactical RPG which uses psychological mechanics to give individuality to each and every unit. The idea of the game is that the player units need to siege a number of enemy defended camps and take them. Once all camps are taken, the player wins. However, the player will lose if they A. lose all of their units, or B. let 20 turns expire before they take the camps. Staying inside of a camp will restock units and heal them slightly, but this also goes for enemy units. Players can also call in allied units at checkpoints for additional assistance. It's also worth noting that checkpoints cannot be captured if there are enemy units within the capture space, meaning that the player will have to clear them out before they can take the camp for their own. Units can also take cover, which will reduce their incoming damage, make them harder to hit, and allow them to move left or right slightly within the cover bounds. There are around 5 different classes in the game at the moment, which feature different weapons and base stat modifiers. There are 3 types of items, which are consumables, ranged weapons, and melee weapons. It's better to use projectiles to attack from a distance, but melee weapons are actually much stronger and they ignore a unit's defense stat. Melee units also do not need to be reloaded. But to use these, the player would have to be within striking distance of the enemy, and therefore firing distance. Like chess pieces, each game class has a variance in utility, which gives units more or less worth in certain situations as the game progresses. The Recon class has high stamina and accuracy, allowing them to discover enemies, get in close and attack, and then get to cover, which is particularly useful for melee attacking with the swift sword. The high damage rifle is great at a mid to long range, but their low HP and defense makes it unwise to leave them out in the open. Recon units are generally the class which will capture camps and then hide within them for a little bit. The Sentinel class has a short-range shotgun, which is really powerful, but can often miss due to its high spread, which can cause pressure increases. The Big Sword has a higher range and damage than the Swift Sword other units carry, making them a heavy hitter. However, unlike the Swift Sword, which swings at 3 different angles, leading to a higher chance of connecting at least once, the Big Sword only has a single strike. These units also have relatively low SP, which makes it means it takes longer for them to get to enemies, but once they're there, they do dominate. The Sniper class have pinpoint accuracy and can shoot from afar with their very long-ranged sniper rifle, meaning return fire often misses. However, their low stamina means they cannot move as far as other units. Their low defense and ammo capacity also means that they usually have to be escorted if they're being challenged by enemies. They do have a swift sword as backup, however it's much better if you keep them far away from other enemies. The Wrecker class have high defense and use a rocket launcher which can devastate multiple enemies within an area of effect. Their launcher is prone to missing, however, and has a low ammo capacity, meaning they should be used with caution as one miss can turn the rockets back on the player units. As a backup, they have a short-range machine gun, but its low accuracy makes it impossible to use from afar. The best way to break their defenses is to get up close and hit them with a melee strike. The support class is similar in stats to the Recon, however they generally have a lower mental fortitude stat and therefore will break down easier. These units come equipped with a pressure gun, which may inflict pressure on units hit, however its accuracy makes it only really usable in low to mid range. When not attacking, the heal rifle is very accurate and can be shot at a unit to increase its health. Whilst this recovers more health than the health splash potion, it will only recover health on the unit that was shot. The upside to this is that using the rifle may lower the support unit and the unit shot's pressure value. The crux of the game is the pressure system, which allows units to accrue pressure whenever they encounter a crisis event. So this could be increased by a unit being inaccurate or hurting allies, and the pressure will decrease if units heal allies or take out enemies. The player can cycle between units as they please, however, units can only move as far as their stamina bar allows, and can only perform as many actions as action points they have. Enemies are also able to perform interception fire as the player moves, which has reduced damage, but can build up easily if the player doesn't move out of the way of them. The player is therefore encouraged to use their units as effectively as possible, getting as much movement and action points out of their turn, but also not to waste action points as inaccuracy will increase their pressure, and staying out of cover leaves them more vulnerable to enemy attacks. Units with chief status have more action points than units without. However, units that defeat a chief unit will gain an additional unit, allowing them to act again. Each unit also has 2 quirks which are individual to them. Quirks can be positive or negative and will increase or decrease the unit's pressure resistance in certain environmental context. I can make a unit perform worse when they're next to an ally they don't like, or if they're claustrophobic and in a tight space. But I can also make them perform better when they're next to units they do like, or environments they do like, for example, near an oasis. Some units even have quirks like Bloodlover, which makes them perform better in the middle of combat. And these environmental contexts are created by a mixture of designer-made box triggers to tell what environment a unit is in, as well as AI perception and environmental queries to perceive units. When at 50% pressure, units will gain either a mental clarity buff or a mental fracture debuff, which will temporarily change their stats. The chance of getting a buff or debuff makes pushing units past their limit a risk-reward decision. At 75% pressure, they are able to use an Agizo potion, which is basically a last hurrah. It increases or decreases a stat by 1 to 4 stages and can really change the tide of battle. At 100% pressure, the unit will enter a breakdown where they are controlled by an AI for a set amount of turns and will perform a set behaviour. Currently the only behaviour set up is to retreat, which makes the unit run away from combat for its duration. This leaves it open to intercept fire and leaves the player in a bad position tactically. Within this game, I really wanted to explore how to make game characters feel more human, and how to build ludonarrative resonance with them. Each quirk is made to relate to a character's backstory, and as we can see here with Jabori and Moon Lao, can also gamify something as simple as a mutual dislike of one another. This rewards the player for paying attention to the unit's backstory and allows them to build a connection with them. Like, immediately you may wonder why they dislike each other, and eventually we may even resolve their dislike in gameplay or in narrative, making them friends, and then we can therefore evolve this quirk from a negative one to a positive one. This intrinsically ties game progression with character progression in a really neat way. Crisis events allow characters to react to their surroundings. I always found it really weird that in other tactics games your friends and allies can die right in front of you, and there is very little or no acknowledgement through gameplay as to what's happened outside of narrative cutscenes. If I had more time, I'd like to add dialogue box and callouts upon crises rather than just using the event log. This would create more of a connection with the player and make losing units sting a lot more than it may do in games like XCOM, for example. The current iteration of Mortal Fallacy is a template which has very intricate and flexible systems. These systems can then be used by game designers to build upon and then tune. One of these is the combat encounter system. Combat encounters can be easily set up using spawn points and will be triggered upon activation cues. This could be the unit interacting with a checkpoint, or the unit passing through a box trigger at a set point. Combat encounters also have waves, so some spawn points can be used multiple times. This is useful for enemies calling in backup and flanking the player. Units are easy to customize, and so are weapons. They both use base classes which hold the bulk of their logic, but then their child classes can also have specific functions or data related to them. For example, the sniper enemies have a higher alert range than regular enemies. Weapons also utilize the use input action differently. Ranged weapons will fire projectiles, whilst melee weapons will play a sword swing animation. Every unit has a stat controller which controls stat changes and calculates and also outputs modified stats. A unit's base stats may be modified by debuffs and buffs in the game, but they are also augmented by the stat changes specified by the base class archetype. Stats also use a 6 up 6 down stage system, and the exact modifier for each stage can be easily specified. For example, a dexterity stat decrease of one stage could take the unit's dexterity down to 90% of its normal value, but we could also specify stage 2 to be 80% of its original value. This would then be used to affect the player's accuracy. The stat controller also handles incoming damage and will calculate if the hit was a critical hit, the damage reduction of a unit if they're in cover, and the damage reduction from the unit's defensive stat. Units also have a context controller which handles everything related to the pressure system. This will check if the current environmental context meets the requirements for certain quirks or crises. For example, if a quirk only occurs nearby an enemy unit, it will check the amount of enemy units in the current unit's perception. The context controller also handles breakdowns and mental effects. It subscribes to the turn change event dispatcher and will decay breakdown and mental effects by 1 each turn. To put this into context, if a breakdown lasts 3 turns, this will count down 1 each turn that goes by and handles when the breakdown should stop. It will then output information to the event log so the player can understand exactly what is happening. The action controller is the final piece of this puzzle. It handles all the action requests from both player and AI controllers. It will then calculate the action point cost of any action performed and deduct that from the unit's AP, or it will output a warning to the event log if the unit does not have enough points to perform that action. The action controller also has the ability to queue actions to be performed directly after the last one is finished. This is useful for the breakdown action, which would happen immediately at 100% pressure, but this would stop units that are currently performing another action, which could cause some unintended behaviour, as states would not then turn off and on at the correct time. The turn system is handled within the game mode and will utilize the information specified from the mission blueprint to determine the faction order, the amount of turns allowed, what combat encounters are to be started at the beginning of the game, and what win-loss conditions the current map should use. Currently at the beginning of a battle, it goes straight into the player's turn, and when the win or loss conditions are met, it'll say you won or you lost. Now the mission BP I've created actually allows designers to be a bit more versatile with this order of operations. Designers could specify a cutscene to happen before a battle begins or once one is won. It's even possible to pause the battle once a specific checkpoint is taken to play a cutscene. I've also created a token system which gives the current unit an act token, which means they drive the game. So for example, only the token unit should be able to move at any given time, and if they are aiming in, all AI should stop intercept firing. AI units will also only look at and target the token unit with intercept fire, as it wouldn't really be engaging to attack an inactive unit. The game mode also handles unit switching and also ensures the breakdown units perform first on any given turn. This stops player turns randomly being interrupted halfway through. Overall, I'm very happy with how this has turned out, and I'm super excited to continue on with this game system. Thank you to everyone who helped along the way. Special thanks to Elliot, who used my game systems to create this level, and Andy, who did the music for this game. Also thanks to Abubakar Salim, Dominic Hodge, Sai Peters and Kagakolu for their lovely feedback on the game design and for playtesting my game. Also thanks to you for listening and watching this video. Reflecting on this, it's been really interesting to see this idea develop from an idea to a playable concept. It's the culmination of my university years and everything I've learned, and despite the fact I found a lot of issues that I might have had time to fix, like player units being unable to intercept fire, as well as some design logic flaws like units not getting enough pressure for killing allies, and damage output and defense across classes being too varied. I think this turned out really well. With more time, I'll address a lot of these issues and add more polish to the game. On a system level, though, it's been really good. The fact that everything's really versatile and easy to change makes it really robust, and it'll be really simple to improve on and build upon. To conclude, I hope you've enjoyed this look into Mortal Fallacy, and make sure to keep an eye out on more updates on Mortal Fallacy or any future projects I work on, even after I graduate from university. So yeah, thank you very much, and goodbye.